All right, y'all. This one, I really like this episode. I really like this episode right here. I think this is a very important concept to understand because there's a huge mistake that people make, especially when they're beginners, in the way that they go for searching out information and the information that they think is valuable and what they look for. It can often be kind of flawed. So I think this episode is going to be pretty cool. The title of this one is Mindset versus Principles versus Strategy versus Tactics. So the way that I see it is all four of these things are kind of different levels of information. There's different types of information, and I kind of think of these in terms of levels. So it's like mindset is the highest level, principles is the second highest level, then strategy, and then tactics. So the big mistake that I just mentioned that a lot of beginners make is focusing almost exclusively on the tactics. And we're going to get more into, we're going to explain exactly what each of these means and give you guys some examples so you guys can get a better concept of this. Um, but as like a quick thing, like the example that I have for what a tactic is, for example, a tactic in e-commerce is to put a countdown timer on your product page because you think that that kind of urgency or scarcity is going to make people want to buy more stuff. It's going to increase your conversion rate, whatever. That's a tactic. That's a very specific thing. It's a very specific tactical action that you can take. And it's kind of these sorts of things that people tend to focus on when they're just getting started and they're trying to figure out, how this whole e-commerce thing works, what they should be doing. They look towards the tactical information because that is most people's concept of business. Most people who have never run a business successfully before, they think of business as a largely tactical thing. And obviously, tactics are important to some extent in business. They're definitely a part of it. But if you only focus on the tactics, you're missing out on like 90% of the rest of the information that is going to be really valuable to you and that's really going to help you achieve your goals. So let's go through here. Scotty, I have these notes that I wrote here. I want to hear your take though, because I know that you're a little bit iffy on the way that I describe some of these things. Can you go through and explain what each of these things are, each level: mindset, principles, strategy, and tactics?
Okay, so mindset. You've got in the notes how you think, also can call it mental models. Yeah. I think that's probably a decent way to describe it. The difference between mindset and principles is a little bit of a gray line sometimes, figuring out what exactly is mindset, what exactly is a principle. Um, but we don't have to get super lost in the details there. Principles, you say timeless things that always work. Yeah, I would say principles are heuristics to live by. Principles are perhaps like mental models, rules in quotation marks to guide your thinking. That's what a principle is. Principles are a heuristic to guide your thinking on a specific question or on a specific problem. Strategy, you've got in the notes the overall way you operate.
I think strategy is pretty intuitive for most people.
Yeah, strategy is the plan you have for getting to where you want to go. Tactics are, you've got in the notes, specific actions. Um, can be a specific action, can also just be a specific a specific method, a specific a specific tool, for example, like the countdown timer that you mentioned. A specific tactic would be running free plus shipping offers. That's a tactic. Um, if if you think of it in terms of a hierarchy or a pyramid, Base would be, we'll leave aside mindset for now. The base would be your principles. Those are the heuristics. Those are the timeless principles that guide your decision making. That would be the bottom layer. On that is built your strategy, which again should be based on principles that work. And then tactics you used are right on top, sort of the tip of the pyramid, the least impactful thing, and it's based on the strategy you're implementing. You're going to pick the tactics to use based on that. Does that make sense? You like that
Yeah,
breakdown?
it makes sense. Besides the fact that we just switched up, I said like mindset is the highest level and tactics is the lowest level. We just kind of turned it on its head and turned it into a pyramid. But I think that shouldn't be too difficult to follow. I do want to mention the fact that I think a lot of people have a kind of like a preconceived notion in their head of like mindset. And mindset is this kind of like woo woo vague thing that you're like, dude, does that really like, does that even really make sense? Like it's kind of pointless, like who needs that? Who needs mindset stuff? I feel like a lot of people think like that. And personally, I think that couldn't be further from the truth. I think that your mindset is literally the most impactful thing for your success in business, for your overall happiness in life, because literally everything starts in your mind. Like we did an episode on this a couple weeks ago. Everything starts in their mind. And if your mindset sucks, no amount of sick tactics, even if you're doing all the right tactics, if your mindset is terrible, you're probably not going to be successful in business. And the same thing goes with principles. If you have all the sickest fucking specific tactics, but you don't understand the key principles of how to operate a business, you're probably not going to be successful. And the same thing is it kind of keeps going on and on. The stuff that is like more vague and seems less directly actionable is actually the stuff that is most impactful. And I think this is a huge thing that most people don't really have a concept of because they just haven't really seen it applied in their life. And it's hard for them to conceptualize it because with a tactic, you can do something very specific and immediately see a specific result. And it's very easy to see.
That's exactly what it is.
But
Principles
with
and mindset take time to show results.
yeah, when you have a big mindset shift, it seems vague and you don't see the effect of it right away. But honestly, to me, that's what makes it so important because for one, most people aren't even focusing on it. And that means that it can, be a leg up for you, an advantage in some way. And yeah, I'm not exactly sure where I was going with that. I lost my train of thought a little bit there.
I'll just give two examples for mindsets that are absolutely huge. And again, these, if you applying this to your life is a constant process. You have to remind yourself of this every single day. And it doesn't show results instantly, but looking back in 10 years, it will be the most important thing. Horrify will not matter in 10 years' time as you look back on your life. These mindset principles very much could. Number one.
Oh, that's confusing calling them mindset principles.
Oh, geez, guys. Mindset. Okay. So, number one, mindset, idea, concept is get a little bit better every day. Get 1% better every day, and you're going to see incredible growth. Talked about it in a previous episode. Super true, super helpful, will make a huge difference in your life if you apply it consistently over years. Another concept like that is what we talked about in this knowledge drop, which is do what you say you're going to do 100% of the time. That is just a mindset. And if you apply that to your life, you internalize that concept, your life will be dramatically different in 10 years' time.
Yep. And I do think that mindset and principles can kind of like mesh together in some ways. They're both kind of like timeless things that are really, really important and they kind of determine how you operate in the specific tactics that you do. So don't worry about like, I don't know, like thinking of those as two totally separate things. I think like really the point that we're getting at is Tactics are good. You know, I'm not saying that you need to like completely ignore all tactics, but like the overwhelming majority of people would be better off if they stopped completely, if they completely stopped learning tactics and focused on, for example, learning the principles of business. And this is really one of the main reasons that me and Scotty emphasize learning the skill of direct response marketing so much, because the skill of direct response marketing is just principles. It's literally just timeless principles, things that were true 30 years ago, things that are true now, things that are going to be true in 30 years. And because these things are so timeless, they always work. So it's not something that you need to constantly be relearning. It's like you can learn it once, and then as long as you can keep that in your brain and stick with it, it's always going to be there. It's always going to work like that. You know, like for example, in terms of like marketing, like women are always going to want to have better skin. That is a principle of human nature. You know, for example, that's never going to go away. You can learn that now. That could be useful to you now. That could be useful to you in 50 years. And these things are much more impactful in terms of your overall business success than specific tactics, because specific tactics come and go. You know, 3-5 years ago, we were putting Horify countdown timers on all our product pages, and that worked. Now, people have kind of caught on to that, and they realize that it's not real scarcity, it's not real urgency. It's just, you know, it's basically just fake in 99% of cases, and they don't really respond to it as well anymore. So that's not something that we do. Now, the tactics change, but again, the principles don't. So if you focus on learning the principles, then you're always going to have this, you know, understanding, this knowledge in your head that can always be applied really no matter what it is you're doing. It depends on how specific you want to get with it, but like principles of business, principles of marketing, principles of human nature, these can be applied to literally anything in your life. And it does, honestly, like it can be applied to stuff outside of business. It can help you get a raise at your job. It can help you persuade your friends to do things. It can make you more likable as a person. There's a lot of different ways that you can apply these things, and that's why they're so impactful.
Yep. And as you're studying direct response, a lot of the really good info is old, which makes it interesting because all the tactics are mute, they're useless. Like shipping in a bulk rate envelope versus personal looking envelope, not applicable to anything that we do at all, except the principle behind it is. The principle behind it is don't ship your ad in an envelope, or don't make your ad
Obviously,
instantly
look like an ad.
recognizable as an ad. Make it
Yeah.
look native, which again is a Facebook tactic. But you could have learned that Facebook tactic not from watching the newest, greatest dropshipping hacks YouTube video. You could have learned it from watching a Dan Kennedy seminar from 30 years ago.
Yep.
You just have to see the tactic, figure out what is the principle behind this, and then apply it to current day. And if you can do that, you're going to come up with your own tactics. So imagine if you're the guy who started using Horify countdown timers before anyone else did it. Probably had to hard code it yourself. Imagine if you were the first guy doing countdown timers because you invented the tactic. Imagine how effective it would have been when you were the only person doing that. That's that. You're never going to find new ideas in YouTube videos. You're going to find new ideas by studying sources that other people aren't studying and applying it to the modern day.
I think that's a really great insight right there. And that's kind of a tactic, honestly. Like a specific tactic is to study businesses in other industries in completely different like times, completely different like parts of the I don't even know how I'm trying to word this, like, you know, old stuff. Like you can gain insight from seeing how Gary Halbert wrote a physical sales letter that he mailed out to people's houses, and you can take the tactics that he's implementing in that and then apply them to things now. Obviously, you're not going to be most likely mailing out physical sales letters to people, but we have the internet. And ultimately, the principles of marketing haven't changed, even though the medium has, the principles haven't. And that's really what matters. If you understand the principles, then you're going to know how to create a solid strategy. You're going to know what specific tactics you should implement when following that specific strategy. And you really want to start at that level. You want to start at the principles level, at the mindset level, and then work your way down. And I guess kind of the main message that we're trying to get across in this is, don't be one of those people who does not open their brain to any information that is not specifically tactical, because you will miss out on so much valuable information and you won't even realize it. And you're just probably going to be kind of like stunted as a business owner, as someone, who's trying to be good at marketing. If all you focus on is tactics, you're going to have a very, very, very limited view of how things work. And it's really important that even though some of this stuff might seem kind of vague, might seem kind of woo, you're like, oh, how does this apply to my life? Whenever you get that kind of feeling, double down on that and go deeper. Because the thing about the mindsets and the principles are, they're not directly handed to you on a silver platter, like, hey, do exactly this, follow these 5 steps, and that's all you got to do. It requires a little bit more critical thinking to figure out how it applies to your own life. And that's like a huge part of being a business owner, is you can't just only do the things that are handed to you on a silver platter, because if that's the case, then you're barely going to freaking do anything. You have to be able to take things that you see in life, in learning from different sources and seeing different sources of inspiration, and be able to take those things and apply them to what you're doing, using your critical thinking, using your brain, and not just trying to rely on being spoon-fed information, like, honestly, like a lot of people do.
100%. That is it.
So I guess, like, to end it off here, I want to go through and, like, just if any of this feels vague and woo-woo, I'm going to try to make it seem less vague and woo-woo. An example, a mindset, kind of like Scotty was saying, you can either view every day as an opportunity to learn, to get better, and to just make 1% of progress towards your goals each day. Or you can view every day as, how can I make more money today, and only focus on making money right now in the short term. Those are 2 very different mindsets. And depending on which one of those you have, you're going to get very different results, regardless of, even if you are implementing the same tactics, even if you have a very similar strategy. Those 2 mindsets seriously impact the way that you operate. And as such, it's going to determine what kind of results that you get. An example of a principle is that good marketing is always based on your market, what the people in your market want. And it relies on you doing research on them and understanding who they are, what they're already buying, what they want to buy, and being able to give them exactly what that is. That's always true. There is no situation where that is not true. Someone who has a better understanding of their market is always going to do better than someone who doesn't. That is a principle of marketing, of business. That's never changing. That's something that you can hammer into your head right now. It will be true now, and it will be true in 60 years when you're old and thinking about marketing for some reason, when you're just sitting there in your little rocker, whatever it is that you're doing when you're old. And an example of a strategy is, oh, Scotty, I like that. That was a good save. In terms of ecom, like, a strategy for ecom is running Facebook ads as your main source of traffic. That's what we do. And if you've taken our Foolproof Facebook ads course, then you'll know that our strategy is basically summed up in the acronym COLE, Creative Offer Angle Logistics. That is our Facebook ad strategy. That's the way that we do things, and that's a strategy. Now, on the other hand, one of our friends does e-commerce a little differently. He's gotten into a different kind of realm with it. And instead of running Facebook ads to drive traffic, he's starting to partner with influencers and celebrities who already have big existing audiences, who have millions of followers on social media. And instead of driving traffic with paid traffic with Facebook ads, he's using their already existing audiences to drive traffic to their brands, to sell their physical products, whatever it is. Those are 2 different strategies. And yeah, that's an example of it. And then again, a tactic in terms of ecom is putting a countdown timer on the product page. As if you kind of listen to that, you can kind of see how the lower down you get, from going from mindset to principle to strategy to tactic, you can see how it gets more specific, and it's easier to understand the lower you get. But just because it's easier to understand doesn't mean that the stuff at the top isn't really, really important. Because just because it feels, a little vague and woo-woo, again, it's extremely important. If you don't believe me, just like freaking take my word for it. I don't think I've done you guys wrong yet. I've really made a good effort not to. And just trust me on this one. It's really, really, really important. Open your mind to these other sources of information that you might not be thinking of, that might not be top of mind to you, that you might not think are directly relevant to you. Open your mind to them and use your brain a little bit to think about how they can apply to your own life. And I think that you're going to see a very different perspective of business, and you're going to have a very different understanding than someone, much better understanding than someone who is focused exclusively on the specific tactics.
Amen.
Amen, brother. Amen. All right. I think that is going to do it for this episode, number 32, mindset versus principles versus strategy versus tactics. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense. It was a little bit all over the place, but I think that's some good stuff. This was a hugely important concept when I kind of initially figured this out, and it had a pretty big impact on my life. I'm hoping that it will do the same for you guys. So that is going to do it for this episode. We will talk to you guys in the next one.